It's the post-trade deadline edition of the panel presented by Coventry Homes. Tony Brar here alongside Jack Michaels and Bob Stauffer, a pair of voices of your Edmonton Oilers. Jack, the Oilers making one move today, and that's bringing in defenseman Dmitry Kulikov for a conditional fourth-round pick, which will turn into a third-round pick if the Oilers advance one round in the Stanley Cup playoffs. What do you make of the move, and what's the value in bringing in a guy like Kulikov?
Well, there's tremendous value bringing in a guy with playoff experience who's played more than 700 games in the National Hockey League, yet at the same time is still only 30 years old. There's plenty of tread left on the tire, and he spent the entire season in a top four role for the New Jersey Devils, and all they've seen all year long is the very best of Eastern Conference forwards. So in other words, he's seen a lot of Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl type players, and he's played against them on a nightly basis. So he is ready to roll. In other words, his game should be at an absolute peak because he's had to be good every night. He's been playing with PK Subban, so he's been in that defensive shutdown role that he's expected to fill here in Edmonton. What it also affords the Oilers is some flexibility in terms of their pairings. So if they want to close out games late with Nurse and Larson, they still have a guy like Kulikov to run out there in their second pair with Tyson Barrie. I'm not certain that he's not going to end up with Adam Larson, which many people expect at the outset.
Okay.
But I also think he's a guy that can also play the right side and, again, affords the Oilers flexibility in terms of their pairings as it relates to game day situations or, Bob, potentially to get certain guys going.
Yeah, and I kind of look at it twofold. I also think, you know what, there's been a couple guys that were given some opportunities on the left side, William Lagesson and Caleb Jones. And I think that the Oilers all season long have kind of been looking for a second-pairing left-shot defenseman. Darnell Nurse, at the start of the year, people weren't sure the Oilers had a top-pairing defenseman. I think we have that question answered now. He's amongst the best defensemen in the National Hockey League. Kulikov can step in. He's playing 19 minutes a game. You take a look at the minutes and the deployment for Caleb Jones and William Lagesson all season long. They've been at around 14 minutes. So I think one thing we know about coaches, they like experience. They now have a more experienced option. He can kill penalties. That was, maybe a little bit of the undoing for some of the minutes that saw a decreased role for maybe where some of us thought a guy like Caleb Jones might have been at the start of the season when training camp opened. And the Oilers never really went down the route, Tony, of giving Evan Bouchard a consistent look over on the left side. They gave him one game against the best team in the league, Toronto, on a night in which Ethan Bear was coming back from an injury. And so they made the decision that, at this stage they're more comfortable with the, Bouchard on the right side. They've got a couple younger defensemen trying to feel their way at 23, 24 on the left side. Now they have a more veteran presence. So to me, a subtle addition that I think can play some hard minutes is experience and, frankly, the type of player that coaches tend to trust more.
Jack, you mentioned that you don't foresee him potentially being a lock on Adam Larson's left-hand side. So what are some potential combinations for Kulikov that you see that would work out great for the Oilers?
Well, I think it's very possible that he'll start with Adam Larson.
Okay.
But what I'm suggesting is Ethan Bear's had a tough season. He didn't get off to the best start, didn't have a great camp, and then just as his game was starting to come around, he gets hit in the head in a game against Toronto by a puck that flew into the bench. And so that set him back a little bit further, and he hasn't got quite up to speed. So if you're Dave Tippett and thinking, look, Ethan Bear's a very important player, we need to get him back to the level he was at last year, what better solution would be for a prolonged stretch potentially with his partner last season, Darnell Nurse? Now, you don't have to do that. Obviously, Nurse and Barrie have been a very good pair. But what Kulikov does, and I think Bob's correct in the sense that the Oilers view this as an upgrade on Jones or Lagesson, if Kulikov all of a sudden plays with Tyson Barrie, it doesn't mean that Tyson Barrie's got to necessarily carry the mail defensively on that line because Kulikov is that guy, and Tyson Barrie potentially could slide into a second pairing role, which he's played for the bulk of his career. It also affords the Oilers the option of dropping Chris Russell back into a third pairing role, which I think at this stage, with Russell having played nearly 900 games and turning 34 next month, that might be better suited for Chris Russell. I just feel it's another solid guy, a minutes eater. He's been at the bare minimum a second pairing guy for all but maybe a handful of games in Winnipeg. And don't forget, at that stage, the Jets had Byfuglien, Trouba, and Tyler Myers. I
Yep.
mean, Kulikov
Yep.
was on a very deep team, and he was still playing 17 or 18 minutes. So he's been that guy, a guy who's been in the NHL since he was 18, a ton of experience, yet still, as I said before, plenty of tread left on the tire. He just turned 30 last fall.
We heard from Oilers president of hockey operations and general manager Ken Holland this afternoon in saying that they're hoping to get Kulikov on a plane to Edmonton in a couple of days. They're working through some passport issues right now, but the earliest he could be available with the 7-day quarantine would be April 26th in Winnipeg. But Bob, you had a very interesting conversation with Hart Levine from Cap Friendly. What were some of the takings away from that? Because the Oilers are now at 49 contracts.
Yeah, well, and they had limited options, especially in terms of cap space, and this is the scenario that Ken Holland basically inherited. So they had limited, they only really had room for one more contract they could have potentially taken. We'll see what happens in terms of Philip Broberg. I guess in theory he'd have to get us 7 games in for that to count.
7 games at the NHL level.
The NHL level.
Yeah.
So will he be an option? I don't. To be fair, I see him playing in the minors. I'm not sure he gets the recall. The other thing that could occur here is we could see Evan Bouchard get some games down the stretch. Maybe. They don't have to.
Yeah.
But I think what Edmonton's done is they recognize they needed a little bit of a push here on the left side. They've got a little bit of push with some experience. They've got some depth now on defense as well. We'll see what happens with Slater Cuckoo. And that said, what they've got is what they've got up front. So it's going to be, to me, Edmonton's in a certain spot, and I think they're going to be in a real good spot come the off season to potentially add in a couple areas, including maybe a second left winger. But nonetheless, the players that are here have got this team on a 20, along with the coaches, on a 22-9-2 run here over the last 33 games.
Yep.
They're a competitive team. Let's see where they go in the playoffs.
You mentioned Slater Cuckoo. Holland did mention that Cuckoo could be available as early May. Jack, the Oilers are 7-2-2 in their last 11 games, and this comes amidst a lot of schedule changes. How much credit does this team deserve for staying in that one game at a time focus that they keep on mentioning, and both of those regulation losses coming in when the NHL decided to add a game on their road trips?
Well, I was going to say, if you look at their original schedule, both of their losses have come in games that didn't exist 4 weeks ago. That's just the cold reality. I think Edmonton's done a really solid job, as have all the teams, really, of kind of rolling with the punches. But I will say this. I think Edmonton has had some challenges with the schedule that are unique to their own situation. For instance, this coming week, the Oilers are going into what I call a whiplash back-to-back that's been created as a result of the situation, where they're actually going to go fully west of Vancouver, and then on the back end of that back-to-back fly over this very spot on their way to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And so they have been taxed to the maximum extent when it comes to some of the problems that have been created by this whole situation. Having said that, as Bob indicated, it's about what they do in the playoffs. And what that playoff situation looks like right now is a first-round series with the Winnipeg Jets. To this point in the season, the Oilers have beaten Winnipeg 4 out of 6. And I would suggest to you, on this day, I would take Dmitry Kulikov over Jordy Benn. That's just me. Not everyone would agree with that.
Yep.
But I feel like for two teams whose defense have at times been questioned this year, I thought Edmonton did more to strengthen its defense than Winnipeg did in its. So I would say both in the season series to this point and today, slight advantage to the Oilers.
Well, just like here in the Scotiabank Square outside of Rogers Place, Ken Holland constructing a team hopefully for a deep playoff run in the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs. For Jack Michaels and Bob Stauffer, I'm Tony Barr signing off for the panel presented by Coventry Homes.